You know who I blame for that?
I blame something.
YouTube. I blame them for everything there. Whenever I put a video up and the sound's not quite right, bloody YouTube.
Bloody YouTube. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to A Brief History of Mystery and our Mystery Machine live shows here with Stormy from Cyworks. The link is in the description. You can go and just subscribe to him if you're new to the channel.
Subscribe your ass off. Do it now.
Or else.
Or else.
And sorry for the bit of the delay there. That was completely my fault. I didn't press the right button. But, you know, this shit happens. So we are going to be talking a little bit about Bob Lazar because of this Mystery Wire interview between George Knapp and, I've got to say a name, TJ Janazzo. Or Janazzo. Hey, I'm getting a bit better at this thing. So, yeah, they had an interview. So who is this? Who is TJ? Stormy, tell us a bit about him.
TJ Janazzo is this, he was an investigator for the Las Vegas Police Department. And turns out he was one of the informants for George Knapp for most of his career. A lot of the breaking stories Knapp had, not just in the Bob Lazar case, but all over Nevada, came from this officer, this detective, Janazzo. And after he retired, Janazzo was really a wealth of information about Bob Lazar. And the craziest story that he had, well, there's a lot of crazy stories, you know. The craziest story was there were people leaning on the judge in Bob Lazar's pandering case to put Bob Lazar in prison for a very long time. Remember, a pandering charge in Las Vegas is probably, you know, it is something that's hardly ever done, and it's usually a fine because it's Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Sin City. They brag about it being Sin City.
Well, exactly. I was in Vegas. It's 5 or 6 years ago now, and I was walking across a bridge, and this guy just shouting at us, Coca-Cola, bottled water, cocaine, as we're walking across the bridge in the middle of the day. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we was like, right, what was that last one? Yeah. But yeah, no, it's very open. I mean, yeah, and even back then they're saying anyone being put up for pandering charge was very unusual. Yeah. But if we go back to the story a little bit, this is a little bit after Bob Lazar had already become sort of famous, really. The story had already broken. He'd already done that news report where he was blocked out. Hi, Tammy, how are you? So people knew who he was. He then happened to be phoning George Knapp the one day, and he just sort of happened to tell George Knapp that he was helping a local prostitute out with her business. And George Knapp sort of went, "What?
What did you say?"
Yeah, he actually said he thought he was joking.
Yeah, he just put him on international television about Area 51, S4, and UFOs, and now you're working with hookers? I can't hear this, Bob.
But he literally did. He was like, I'm a reporter. I have some credibility. I'm trying, because at the minute, this is where they were still researching Bob like crazy, weren't they? They were trying to go, I'm trying to support your credibility, numbnuts. Why would you do this? So basically, he told Bob, you've got to shut this down. And something I didn't know until this interview, that it was actually George Knapp that shopped Bob to the police.
Yeah.
It was George Knapp said, that goes, you've told me about a crime. I have to report it, you idiot. Sort of thing.
You know, and just like, you know, just like George Knapp reported everything else that Bob Lazar said, I mean, he had to report this. And if anything, I think it shows more credibility for George Knapp on, you know, on his street cred just for being a reporter. You know, he doesn't hold back. And if there's something that's bad for his story, he reports it. I mean, and so
it underlines his honesty and his credibility as a journalist, doesn't it? That even though he knew this would harm him and he didn't have to report it, George Knapp did.
Yeah.
He told Bob, shut it down. And then and he just said he just phoned the local sort of sheriff sort of thing or under sheriff and just said, look, I know this is going on. And they threw the book at Bob, it's fair to say. And like you said here, they charged him for pandering, which isn't it's like in Vegas, it's like jaywalking or something. And it's like it's one of those things that's technically a crime, but nobody ever gets prosecuted for it. He ended up in court, and it was full of journalists. You can actually go on and look at the video for. Hey Trev, how are you, sir?
Hello.
And you can actually go on and see the video of him. The arraignment sort of thing. One of the interesting things was the parole and probation service basically put in a report, and this TJ Janazzo, I said it earlier.
You did.
Janazzo. He said these guys quite regularly put in reports that were sort of like really strict, like throw the book at them. They were very much law enforcement sided sort of thing, but the judges very rarely actually followed the what they said, and in this case, they were pushing for jail time.
Yeah,
for a crime that nobody even got. Like you said, normally would be a fine and a smack on the wrist and don't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
This was a time when pimps used to drive around in their BMWs, very openly, sort of wandering around and checking all their hoes. Am I allowed to use the word hoe?
Well, probably. I think that'd be the vernacular.
Yeah.
Checking on their nose.
Yeah. But I mean, this was something, it wasn't hidden. It wasn't a secret, Even in the UK, prostitution is one of those things that as long as they keep it on the down low, the police pretty much, they know where they are and they know what they're doing, but they ignore it. They'd rather they were in some like a massage parlor or something like that safe than on the streets. And they just don't want it to be public. They don't want it to be out there. The police know who they are, but they don't do anything about it as long as they keep themselves to themselves. And all Bob was really doing here, in this case, was the books. From sounds things, he sort of like helped them out with the computers and stuff, didn't he? By the sounds of it.
Yeah.
He wasn't actually a pimp.
Yeah, he was he was like the back end IT guy. He helped him with the books. Why hookers keep books, I don't know. He's helping
sensible with the tax man.
Right. Yeah, well, this bottle of lube clearly has to be expensed to my expense account. Yeah, I mean, okay, but fine, they keep books. I guess maybe they're honest hookers with the IRS. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I've got so many. I'm thinking, what would be a tax write-off for these people?
Well, yeah, shave cream, lube, more lube.
I wasn't going to say it, but fair play. You've got a cheeky face. You can get away with it.
So anyway, but yeah, Bob was the nerd in the back typing all this stuff in apparently into their books and installed the security system. Yeah,
exactly. And apparently this was a girl, one of the prostitutes was actually somebody Bob had known since he was like 12. And I mean, TJ actually talks about in the video. The video, by the way, there is a link in the description. You can go and watch it for yourself. I've only put the link in for part 1, but you can follow through to part 2, 3, and 4 really easily. But he was saying that basically he felt like maybe he had a bit of a crush on him, and maybe had a bit of a crush on her. And
I mean, you see it from Bob's point of view. Oh, honey, could you help me with my books? And then flashes her bits. I mean, it's.
I wonder that's how he paid it.
Yeah. I mean, Bob is already coming off of a bad relationship when he found out from the government that his wife was fucking the flight instructor.
Yeah.
So Bob was at this point in time, a free agent, I guess. And
I mean, it was literally that bad as well, wasn't it? When he got chucked out of his role at S4, he literally was told in an interview, like, we do bug your phone and your wife is having an affair.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like shaking. He went, and it was like, it was after that he really went off the rails and sort of, he shot himself in the foot so badly after that. But that's kind of what Bob does. And then he did it again with this prostitution job that he then took on. So you mentioned a little bit earlier But not only was the parole board really pushing for a prosecution,
Right.
it seems as well that this TJ Janazzo, yes, actually, thank you. He says he witnessed 2 men.
Right. Men.
They came to the judge one day. He wasn't in the room when they were speaking to the judge, but he did speak to the judge immediately afterwards. And he talks about this judge is not afraid to, you know, be quite vocal. You know, if he's not happy about something, he you know, he'll make you well known. He says basically that the judge was being leaned on to get a prosecution. Janazzo doesn't really talk about. I'm going to call him TJ. Let's go with TJ.
TJ. All right.
Doesn't say. He says these men didn't seem to identify themselves, but they came across to him as some sort of abbreviated government agency, FBI, CIA, something. They were wearing suits and no ties, and he said that was something that would annoy the judge anyway. Something. But then, you know, the judge actually spoke to him afterwards, and he dragged TJ in, and he sort of said, "Look, I know you know Bob, don't you? You know this person. Hi, what's your poison? How you doing, sir? Hi, Patrick. Oh, Patrick's asked us to be a little bit more serious. Sorry, man. We do add a laugh and a joke a little bit occasionally, but you know, life's boring if you don't have a little bit of a laugh. So, you know, and he was asking, well, what do you know about Bob? Do I trust him? Do I believe him? And a lot of this stems from the fact that Bob said, I've got degrees and postgrad degrees from MIT and Caltech. And he basically, other elements of his background. And when they looked into it, they couldn't find any proof of it.
Yeah.
That was a big part of why he ended up staying in court for as long as he did, because they were saying, look, just tell us the truth. And he stood by his story of saying, I've got a master's degree in, you know, I just like the judge going like, right, tell us the truth or you're going to prison. I know, I'm seriously. And Bob Lazar wouldn't do well in prison.
No.
No. So what do you think about that then? Do you think that these guys, we've only got this TJ's word for it, that this happened. The judge in question has passed away since, Judge Lehman has passed away since, so we can't corroborate it. It's quite an extraordinary claim. What do you actually think about it as a...
Well, you know, in terms of TJ's veracity, again, you know, George Knapp used him as a source for other stories that turned out to be 100% accurate, and I think one of them he won a Peabody or Pulitzer for. And so the guy apparently had the inside track on all the lowdown that was going on in Las Vegas and the greater Vegas area. And so I don't see, there's no reason to think that the TJ was dishonest or some sort of disinformation agent. Besides, you know, there's all the other, you know, corroborating evidence that, you know, Bob Lazar did, you know, work at, you know, for the Office of Naval Intelligence because he had the tax forms.
Yeah.
You know, he was in the phone directory for the laboratory. And there was just one, I mean, it's just one piece of information after another. I mean, the phone book is actually listed as a physicist. You know, the lab techs don't get a phone extension. And Lawrence, they don't.
And Bob did though also present a ID badge, didn't he? And the title of the title of the defense thing was slightly wrong.
Right.
So there are problems with Bob's story as well. I mean, we can't skirt around the fact that there are difficulties with Bob's story.
Yeah, the biggest one being the absence of proof that he actually went to these schools he did.
Yeah. And it took like 20 years as well for something. Now there have been some witnesses to come out and said, no, I took Bob. I dropped him off at the uni. I dropped him off at the library there. But they seem to come out like 20 years later. When Cobell sort of started interviewing people and Cobell sort of got into the story, they seem to suddenly find these people. They're Bob's friends, apparently, but they weren't willing to talk about it sooner. But they were sort of like, yeah, we did that. Yeah, I took him.
the Bob, like TJ mentioned, is almost impossible to pry anything out of Bob, and so a lot of his friends were able. I mean, his close friends, which was less than a half dozen, I would say, the people he would take up to Area 51 and watch the UFOs fly around. Those were his core friends, and they did speak out for him, but they didn't go to school with him. They worked with him.
Yeah.
They were neighbor. I think one guy was a neighbor, maybe.
Yeah, one guy lived 2 streets down. Yeah, they used to give him the odd lift occasionally, stuff as well. That is one thing actually TJ does talk quite a lot about in the start of the video, that he says, George Knapp immediately says, what did you think of his credibility? Because I thought he was a believable guy, but it seemed that this TJ was actually around at the time. He knew Bob because of George Knapp. And George Knapp, he immediately started asking him to sort of doing a lot of this research for him. He was trying to, find out about Bob, sort of thing. So that's why TJ knew him, and that's why he was involved. The one thing is he's talking about, he was involved in trying to find out the supervisor from S4, Dennis, Mariani. So Bob, very early on, actually in the first televised interview, he actually named his supervisor from S4. This Dennis Mariani, which doesn't seem like a very good idea. And actually, TJ says that seems to have been a bad idea, because there's been questions about whether he even exists. But TJ says he did find corroborating evidence, not only of his existence, but one of the things Bob talked about was that this Dennis was afraid for his life and requested or applied for a concealed weapons permit. And TJ found evidence of it. I do have a little bit of a problem with that part of the interview, though, is that it does feel like George Knapp is leading him a little bit. He sort of says, "Oh, you looked for that, didn't you?" And TJ's sort of like, "Oh yeah, I think I might have found something." And I do worry a little in a couple of places. George Knapp's leading him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, these events were 30 years ago now. And so, you can tell that, Knapp's got, apparently Knapp has his notes out, or recently reviewed his notes, and is leading, said, and he wants to get him on record to say a specific thing. So he asks the question. And since, the rules of journalism is a little bit different than the rules of court, you can't lead a witness, but you can definitely, but in journalism, you can actually, you can definitely ask somebody, remind them, did you do this specific thing? And this thing happened. When was this thing? And yeah, that's right. And I mean, and Knapp does that several times through the interview. But again, these are events that was 30 years ago, and
nearly 40.
And as a detective in Vegas, you've seen some other shit go down.
Yeah,
it's probably even crazier.
Yeah. TJ even says at one point, doesn't he? He goes, "Oh, you're gonna have to remind me. I know it'll come to me when you sort of leave me a little bit. You're gonna have to remind me, sorry." Because one of the things another thing they talk about is this unknown female or named female that George Knapp was trying to speak to about, like, metamaterials that were found or that were at S4.
The court reporter.
Sorry? The
court reporter.
Yes, the court reporter. I don't see that her name is that she's named in it, but I've only seen this in a transcript. So, but there's a meeting between Holmes and Navarre and some military personnel, and she was talking about. She told George Knapp apparently that these metamaterials. She never really said they were from off planet, but she sort of intimated they were, or they weren't from here. There's lots of interviews, but he says that basically she then went off grid. TJ was trying to find her. TJ actually became quite good friends with her over time, and she was scared out of her mind.
Yeah.
There's one story about apparently she went home to see her family, and she's with her children, and some guy basically approached her and said, "Don't forget the desert's a really big place." Yeah. It stops talking about what you're talking about. And then she went off grid. She was not talking to George Knapp anymore, And TJ says he got to a point where he was quite good friends with this person, and she just flipped. Yeah. She was just like, not having it. So what do you think about then? This seems to be TJG seems to be talking about that people were being intimidated in it. We've always had this rumors. I remember Bob talks about one time that they tried to kill him and somebody shot his tire out on the motorway. And I've never really believed it. I've always thought, if these people are going to kill you, they're going to kill you. And all right, you got a flat tire on the motorway. Is that really? Oh, sorry, a highway. I called it a motorway, didn't I? Sorry, you probably didn't even know what I was talking about. The highway. It was on the interstate. Sorry. And,
yeah, I mean, he was. He claimed that they tried to kill him, on the interstate. And I can't believe that, because there's not just Lazar has claimed government intimidation, but I mean, look at what the United States government has done toward other whistleblowers, not UFO whistleblowers, just whistleblowers in general. Julian Assange. I mean, good God, and Chelsea Manning also comes to mind. People that are just, this shit's wrong. What the government's doing is wrong. I'm going to whistleblow, and all of a sudden they find themselves in prison. Now, what the things that Chelsea Manning was talking about, what Bob was talking about, are two completely different things. One is the realm of what everybody already knows, and Bob opened a whole other kettle of fish when he started talking about S4, and I reverse engineered alien spacecraft at S4.
Even just talking about Area 51 must have pissed some people off. Never mind then going, he's told them it's there, and then he actually told them what they're up to. I was like, whoa, I was annoyed enough that you just telling them it's there.
Yeah.
Never mind the rest of it. No, I'm with you on that. I find this interview, though, really interesting, that we're seeing sort of behind the curtain a little bit on what was actually going on at the time. And obviously, we've seen George Knapp several times on the TV, and loads of interviews and loads of things. But this actually gets seen. Basically, George says, "Look, we've never been able to talk about this before because you were still doing the work for me. You were still actually out there doing it, putting your neck on the line for me.
Yeah.
You've now been retired 6 years. We can talk about it." One thing I did think was quite interesting, that this TJ did come across as actually being interested in UFOs, though. And that always makes me a little bit nervous, in that if somebody's actually got an interest in the subject, and then you're then asking them about it, sort of thing. But he sort of said that, I've talked to people, military guys, people from Area 51, so on and so on, about this subject, and they used to talk, button lip, nobody would repeat anything. Nowadays, you can get a little bit more, but he gets more of people bullshitting and just making stuff up.
Oh my God, yeah.
Saying that they're there than anything else. I mean, this guy is an investigator, though, and he seems to, he knows his stuff. He knows when people are lying to him, for one. And he says Bob's credible.
Yeah. And, I think it's just another, feather in Bob's cap that, okay, now law enforcement has come out and said, yeah, there were men trying to get after the judges was not playing ball with the DA's office, and who knows who they were talking to. And they went to men from someplace, apparently with an agenda that was for government secrecy, leaning on the judge, and also leaning on the court reporter that for other cases involving Area 51, that this one court reporter had been in attendance, leaned on her. And still we keep narrowing things down. So at some point in time, we're just going to have to really consider, did they wipe Bob Lazar's educational records? I mean, because everything else is, the crazy shit, man, the crazy stuff, the hooker story. That's checking out.
I've always thought that hooker story, a lot of people say, like, oh, look at his thing. He was involved in that hooker thing, like it's a bad thing. And I'm looking at going, no, I think it adds to his credibility. Yeah, right, he did something stupid. But then he was dragged in front of court. He was terrified out of his mind. that he was going to go to prison.
Mhm.
TJ actually talks about that he was considering running. He was
Yeah.
considering legging it. But
Yeah.
at no point did he say that his education was a lie. If it was, it would have been much easier for him to say, yeah, okay, I'm lying. Can I take my fine now, please, and go home? And that would have been much easier for him. But he didn't. He kept saying, no, I've got these, this is my qualifications.
Yeah.
It's not even that big a deal. It's not even that relevant to the case. Do you know what I mean? It's not like he was saying, I don't know her and I was nothing to do with it, and lying about the actual facts of the case. He was just lying about his history.
Yeah.
And
I think,
refused.
if anything, that the fact that the feds come to lean on the judge, the judge could then understand why the education was missing. Because everything else that, in terms of employment or whatever, even though the government did deny that existed, he had physical proof of.
Yeah.
And Bob has no control over the registrar's office of these universities, Caltech and MIT.
Yeah, exactly. It really does add to the credibility of it, assuming it's true. Because, like I say, I am going to just say you've always got to be a little bit careful. We've got one person's word for this. So we've got to have that. But, like you said, you've got to then weigh it up with everything else. If it is true, and this was saying, when we did the "Do We Believe in Bob" video, and we said in the end, yeah, I do believe Bob, and I'm like 80% certain that he's telling the truth, but I can't go any higher than that because people do lie. You get fantasists, you do get these sort of things. People lie. But George Knapp, a reporter that really has shown through this interview that he was more than willing to harm the story with the truth. Yeah, just still supports Bob after 30 years.
Yeah, and Janazzo isn't selling a book.
Nope.
Was an informant for George Knapp for more than a decade in the Las Vegas Police Department, in the courthouse, and informed on other cases other than Bob. It has nothing to do with UFOs. So to me, he went from, I think, a street cop to a detective, and there's nothing telling me that this guy is not credible. He turned out to be a very credible source, and it's just one of his sources was the whole Bob Lazar pandering case, and his experience with that case with the judge and the court reporter, who was also leaned on for other non-Bob Lazar related cases that dealt with Area 51. I think specifically it was injury cases, I think.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
And you can know there's a lot of people that have sued the government because they were injured on the job at Area 51 with mysterious chemicals. And they can't even get, I remember one gentleman, and I don't have any direct link. This was years ago. One gentleman was suing the government because he had cancer, and he got cancer from one of the burn pits. He believes he got this really exotic form of cancer he got from when they were burning stuff in one of the burn pits of Area 51. And the government treated him just like they did Lazar. We don't know who you're talking about. He doesn't work here. We don't know what. There's no such thing as Area 51. And this guy died. He couldn't get. And he died broke because the government wouldn't pony up for the healthcare for him.
I remember the case you're talking about, actually. Yeah. Even if that wasn't alien technology, it was something they were messing with that they kept burning. They just didn't. Haven't they? Recently, there's been another case that somebody was working on the Blackbird, and he got cancer as well because he was working on the project around the Blackbird, and they got cancer because of something they were working with. About 2 years ago, I think they actually won that case, though, because they finally actually admitted what they were working on. They wouldn't admit it before then. It's amazing how things when the government decides something secret, they completely shut down on it, even when the evidence is overwhelming. It's very rare they actually then admit anything. So before we call it a day, because we're only having a little one today, only a short one, 115, element 115. So there is the video. There you go. I knew you'd have it ready. So got the video of Bob actually with that hockey puck shaped thing that he's got. This is a lead line thing with an air at 115 in the middle that he says he had. And there's the experiment that you have the film of, and there's smoke going across the top of it and a laser beam bouncing, and you can actually see the light bending, which he said is impossible because of the thing. But we don't have a very good version of the video because Bob Lazar taped over it. Was it the Golden Girls? I think he taped the Golden Girls.
Lazar did. I think it was George Knapp.
George Knapp taped over it watching the Golden Girls.
Knapp taped over it with Golden Girls.
Yes, dipstick. Good show, though. Good show. It's on Disney Plus now. Go watch it. But one thing that says, TJ says he was there. He says he was there during the setup. He saw the hockey puck. He saw element 115. He doesn't actually go far as saying he saw the experiment, but he says he was there for the build-up and he was there for the setup. So that is just one more tidbit, really, of evidence that sort of supports. Again, we're assuming that we have to assume, that we're going to believe this guy. It's his word testimony, but it's an eyewitness testimony. And when we go along with everything else, for one thing, we know that experiment happened. We can't see the full thing, but we have seen a slither of it. So we know it happened. That event happened. If that was an elaborate hoax, then why did Bob do it the way he did? And then why? If it's an elaborate hoax, then we have to assume that also George Knapp is a liar, because the bit about him then taping over it, basically taped over the important bit of the experiment. We have to start thinking about that's part of the hoax, and everything that I know about George Knapp doesn't ring true. He doesn't, like I said, the evidence in this video, we're talking about how he was the one that shopped Bob to the prostitutes. He's an honest, credible guy. I'm not going to say the same about Jeremy Corbell because I can't stand the guy. But George Knapp seems to be honest. He might be wrong, but he seems to be honest.
Yeah, and the thing is, this isn't George Knapp's only story. I think I sent you a link to another story George Knapp did. It was on water, the water crisis here in California. It was filmed several years ago. Of course, it's gotten a lot worse since then. But that was typical of George Knapp's reporting. I mean, he's not on the UFO beat. He's just on the investigative beat. And, he did a complete story on how California got so screwed up in terms of the water crisis. Typically 15 to 25% of America's food comes from California and the desert. And the state has diverted a tremendous amount of water resources for agriculture into the desert. And so the thing that he was talking about in this other report, I guess we can link that to later, was that here in the desert, we plant water hungry crops, not water, resistant crops, whatever needs the most water in the desert. Well, that's what we plant, furthering the water crisis. So we get less food per gallon of water because we're planting water intensive crops in the desert. And it was a great story, and I'd like to see him do a follow-up. But yeah, UFOs are not George Knapp's only beat. It's just this
just happened to be he's an investigative reporter in Nevada, isn't he? So I mean, it's or he was at the time. So he was a lot to do. He's done the mob stories about the mob. He's basically done all the stuff you'd expect somebody, an investigative reporter in that area, to be talking about. Crooked politicians, everything else. He's an award-winning investigative reporter. It's a fascinating insight. It's a really, like I said, it's a really interesting insight into the mind of Bob Lazar as well. Like I said, how he was terrified and thinking about he was going to run for it, and George Knapp and TJ Janazzo had to talk him out of it. And it was basically the TJ sort of like sneaking bits of information about the court case. So saying, no, you're going to be okay. That was the only reason that Bob didn't run for it. And however well I think Bob would do in prison, I don't think he'd do well on the run either. So it's a really interesting interview. I really suggest you guys go and listen to it, because I think whether you believe Bob or not, it gives you another insight.
Yeah.
And I swing on Bob. On Bob Lazar sometimes. Sometimes I'll watch things and I think, oh, God, no, this is just ridiculous. He's so full of shit. And then other times I think he's been proved right again about something else. On the 115 thing, some people think of that as the smoking gun. This proves it. And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't really. He could have just said a number. He obviously is a scientist. He knows the periodic table. He knows 115 wasn't taken. He could have just gone, it was 115. And he's just lucky that then somebody's Moscovian was created. That, and then like the science caught up with him. He could just be a really lucky liar. But I think there's so much other stuff. The 115 isn't the smoking gun for me.
Yeah, and how did such a lucky liar end up with actually, working for the Office of Naval Intelligence, working for Lawrence Livermore? I mean, appearing on the front page of the local newspaper with his jet car. How? I mean,
I do like that. The people say he's not even that good a scientist.
He's lucky a liar. He also had a really lucky career.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
With just a
good engineer. I was to say as well, he's a very intelligent guy.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me and goes, well, why would he get the job at Los Alamos? Why would he get a job at Area 51? And I'm saying, because it's obviously he's a guy that thinks out of the box. That's very clear from everything we know about him. He doesn't think normally, or in the normal structured way. And I could see that if you're working with technology that is, way out, alien technology, something we just do not understand, you're going to want somebody that thinks out of the box. You're going to need somebody that thinks differently, because then you might have half a chance of actually figuring something out, that somebody else wouldn't have understood or believe, So I could come and said that I would want a couple of wild cards in my team. Get the Stanton University or MIT trained white coats, scientist nerd guy with glasses, and then bring in somebody that built a jet car in his garage.
Exactly.
Okay, so do you think this adds how much credibility do you think this story actually adds to it?
Well, for me, there's several threads of credibility. One, it's a long-term informant of George Knapp, who's informed on other stories that turned out to be true in Nevada, and specifically the greater Las Vegas area. Secondarily, there's the court reporter, I think, is another strong story. Also, that George Knapp threw him under the bus, and said he had to deal with this. And I think that adds more credibility to George Knapp. And the thing that it doesn't do, any of this does, is negate any of Bob Lazar's credibility. I mean, I think it adds significantly to it, because here we have a detective that was on the case that testified that strange men would come in and leaned on the judge for a specific verdict, and also leaned on the court reporter that was in on secret sessions concerning Area 51 and litigants.
For me, this is just one more piece of the puzzle. On its own, I wouldn't put a lot of weight on this. It's one person's testimony. It may or may not be true, but it's one more piece to a puzzle that individually I might say, okay, like 115, like I just said, that's one piece of a puzzle. It's not nearly concrete for me. This is one piece of a puzzle. It's not, but you start putting it all together, and at what point do you go, well, okay, the little bits that we are suspicious about, migraines and interviews, not getting, university college professors' names right, whatever else. At what point do we go, well, the way that the information pro Bob being truthful just outweighs the other stuff so much as a factor of 10 or 20. Yeah. At what point do you go, well, actually, those few little mistakes don't matter, because there's so much weight the other way. And that's just like, there's so many pieces of this puzzle now coming together. And for me, nothing. The only real stuff that actually goes against Bob is the stuff Bob said himself when he gets people's names wrong and things.
Yeah.
I've never seen any hard written down evidence to say Bob's a liar.
And look
Sorry, go on.
and I think the thread is when you compare whistleblower stories, Chelsea Manning, et cetera, and how hard the U.S. government goes after them, imprisonment and so forth and so forth. They've treated Bob the very same way.
Mm-hmm.
If this was just some guy standing on a street corner, in Las Vegas shouting, "I worked on alien spacecraft," would they give a shit? But the reaction from the government, not just from the detective's point of view, but everything else that they've done to Bob that has been documented.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the government going so hard after Bob? If he's just a crazy person that didn't work for them, why going so hard against Bob?
Yeah. Yes, so aggressive. Yeah. I mean, I know we see things like the FBI raid in his business in I forgot the name, but you know it. Nuclear.
Oh, United Nuclear, yeah.
United Nuclear. To me though, that's again that was so hyped up in the Jeremy Corbell movie, which I hate. I hate that film. It harmed Bob's credibility so much for me, that film. But it actually turned out to be nothing to do with 115 or anything else. It was to do with bloody Bob had actually sent nuclear material in one of his games across state borders, which is actually illegal. So they raided him. It's the sort of thing completely believe Bob would do. I remember I saw George Knapp in an interview about that, and they sort of raised something like that, and Bob just went, and George Knapp just went, "Yeah, it's got Bob written all over it." Something. And that's his friend. They're friends.
Let's throw Bob under the bus again. Oh yeah.
Bob can be occasionally a dumbass.
Yeah.
The whole thing with the firework displays, dumbass. It's like, but that's why he got caught at S4 in the first place, because he decided to throw a barbecue and watch the aliens with his friends.
Well, wouldn't you? I mean, I could see myself doing shit like that. I mean, oh, dude, let's go get some burgers, some charcoal. We'll go up on the mountaintop, watch the aliens. Oh, let's bring night scopes. Yeah.
I don't think I'm ballsy enough, man. Well, even Bob says he regrets doing it. Doesn't he? He said, I was working at the most amazing place on earth. There was like, there was some of the most technologies that I never would have got a chance to go to, and I threw it away.
Yeah.
Idiot.
And, just like, the reason Bob came out with all of this is he felt he was being unfairly treated by the government, eavesdropping, and they were the ones that came and alerted him to the affair. And after he learned of the affair of his wife and her flight instructor, I think it really hit him emotionally hard, and he just,
Yeah, he went a bit doolally, yeah. I mean, that's another thing in this interview that TJ talks about a lot, is that we actually do get an insight into Bob's frame of mind at the time.
Yeah.
And he says it was depression. It was, he was not somebody that was, making up, like, he was basically a hermit. He was basically housebound, so he was not in a good way. And when they had to talk him out of running because of how scared he was from the court, that says loads to me. That just underlines. I've always thought that court case has really underlined his credibility for me, in that he refused to change his story. And then you think about, he was so scared, he was thinking of running and still refused to change his story.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's really huge.
When you'd rather run, and if that's your only option, but the thing that doesn't occur to you is say, oh, no, I didn't go to school at these two places. No, I'm going to run.
Brain, I'd lie. Especially if I was a skinny little white kid, they're going to send me to a proper prison. I'll be like, I'll tell you whatever you want to know.
With those little beat me up glasses that he was wearing at the time,
And you know, one thing I've always thought, if Bob Lazar's a liar and he didn't go to MIT and he didn't go to Caltech, where did he go? Because nobody's ever, I know they came out with that community college bit, that turned out not to be true anyway. So where did he go? Because he's obviously a very intelligent guy. He'd have gone somewhere.
And there's an absence of what Bob was
He was
doing
class,
during
whatever.
his
He was
college
obviously an
years.
intelligent engineer.
Yeah. And there's always, and everyone researching Bob's history, if you say, okay, he didn't go to these schools, well, no one can come up with what he was doing during that slot of time that was his college years.
Yeah. Do that. That's what I mean. There's enough people investigating and trying to catch Bob out, but nobody's ever done that, and that's interesting, And
the other thing about his education that has been remarkable for me is that everyone assumes that he went to a 4-year program, because he always got his master's, not his doctorate. And then you go to the 4-year program, then 2 more years to get your master's. Well, if you got your shit together, you can clip out a lot of your master's program during your baccalaureate studies. I mean, by the time I graduated high school back in the 80s, in 81, I already had like 6 college credits because I was going to college then. And there's a lot of overlap there that I don't think anybody is really discussing.
Yeah, we can kind of do that in this country as well. That your degree is built up of lots of little units that are worth points, and you can do some of those points even at college level. Well, for us, it would be, what for you, high school, 16 to 18 years old, sort of thing. You can do some of your college courses then and build up the points to get. And then, so a lot of the time you can actually skip your first year of college if you've done your A levels and things in this country, right? And you've done your backup course, you can skip the first year and just go and do the second and third year straight away, and you can do extra credit,
right. And because of the American accreditation system, he could have been doing work at one university, transferred those credits over to the other university, and got there even quicker for his master's. I mean, people think, well, he went 4 years here, 4 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here. Nah, that's not how the American system works. You may you may need to be in attendance for 12 credit hours or whatever. But, if you are an accredited university in the United States, you can transfer credits over quite easily between universities as long as they have some sort of closely matching class. You can't transfer like German credits over to a college that doesn't really teach German. It may count as a language, but it doesn't. You can't claim it that you're taking their German class because
it needs to be related to the right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, then, guys. It's only a quick one today because my wife wants me to make tea, and she's already phoned twice, so she's on the way.
Where's the tea?
Get chips on, man.
It's in the harbor.
But so we had to have a conversation about this interview because it's in the harbor. You always have to bring that up. Bloody Americans.
What? You hadn't slammed me for being American yet, so I just thought I'd give you the opportunity.
It is normal. We have at least once, so I have to do. We haven't said aluminium wrong or anything.
Exactly. So. Once a show.
You're behaving. I'm teaching you slowly. But yeah, it's such a fascinating interview. We really had to discuss it. And like I said, it adds so much credibility to a story that we already know so much about. Yeah. And it's already fascinating to learn little tidbits that you didn't know about a story that this is about the 5th or 6th hour of YouTube videos I've done on Bob Lazar now. And then I'm still amazed I'm finding out new things. It's absolutely incredible.
Always stuff is coming up.
And I still believe.
So when we started that Greer series you've been talking about, I mean, I know you love you some Greer.
I'm not watching Stephen Greer TV series on Piggin Gaia or whatever it is. It's going to be on. I can't listen to, even though, right, honestly, I respect Greer. I do, and the work he does. But he makes exaggerations that are clearly not true, and it just drives up the freaking wall. It just drives up the wall. I turned down billions. No, you didn't. Stop talking shit. So no, I'm not watching the Stephen Greer series on that. But if he does Disclosure Project Part 2, where he doesn't say anything and lets other people talk, then I will definitely watch that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, I'd
love to see it.
a new batch of people, a new batch of whistleblowers. Yeah. But
Tammy tried to behave once, 10 minutes in her life, and that was the worst. We don't behave on this channel, generally speaking. We try to, and it's very serious topics we're talking about. Don't get me wrong, we take it very seriously. But at the same time, you're gonna have a little bit of a joke, or life is so boring.
Oh my God, right?
Like there's a man there sat with a 115 hat on his head. Come on. We're going to have to joke about these things a little bit.
You ever wonder why there hadn't been a lot of Moscovium research in the last 17 years?
Why there hasn't been?
Yeah. I mean, they created a few atoms for a couple of milliseconds.
Yeah, but it's incredibly difficult to produce, isn't it? And isn't the Hadron Collider quite expensive?
I don't think it's done in a Hadron Collider. They used particles into a boron. Was it boron? Some other atom?
I know a lot of the research initially was done at the Hadron Collider. I think that's where. Well, no, first of all, it was in Moscow, wasn't it? It was a thing in Moscow.
Right? Yeah. It was yeah.
And then they did the Hadron, but I think it's just very difficult. And a lot of films said that there's not a lot they can actually do with it. But haven't they then gone on and created like 116, 117, a couple of other since, haven't they?
Yeah.
So the research is still going. The one thing I did like about 115, I was trying to end then. My wife's going to kill me, Stormy. The one thing I did like about 115 was a scientist, or one of the scientists at Moscow that found it, sort of thing, found it, created it.
Discovered.
They said, what would the properties of this be like if it was stabilized? And he's just like, oh, it'd be really, really dense. And they're sort of like, I actually saw him say, he said he like stops and looks and goes, it'd be really dense. And I'm like, that's exactly what 115 would need to be. It would need to be incredibly dense material.
Well, it's element 115. It's got a lot of neutrons.
It's got a lot going on in there, yeah.
I mean, you know.
So I just like that. It's like so Bob picked 115. It does, or the physicists who found it think it might do exactly what he said he think it did. Oh, okay. That adds a little bit more credibility again. Which is what I keep saying. Pieces of the puzzle, always. Paul Hawkins is there talking about. I goes, we're going to do a future video, aren't we? As well, which is going to be a bit more about 115. And I know you've been working on it for a while, and we won't tease it too much. But if you want to look at 115 from a scientific point of view, I'm really excited to do that video with you in the future, Stormy. But we won't say any more.
We won't say any more.
Not say any more. We'll tease you. You have to go and subscribe to the channel. You have to subscribe to Stormy's channel. And you're even going to try and get in touch with Bob over it, aren't you? So that's how far we might go.
Yes.
So Bob Lazar will definitely be on this channel in the future.
Probably not. But, yeah.
You won't. I got to quickly say you won't. So don't get excited and don't unsubscribe if he's never on the channel. So, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. I'll be saying that in the future.
Bob. Thank you, George Knapp, for coming on today. We really appreciate your time.
For coming on my channel with 1,800 subscribers. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you, Stormy.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me. Appreciate the audience tuning in.
Always. The link, Tammy, is in the description for Stormy's channel. So please go and say hi. Paul, thank you for subscribing, and we will most definitely see you all next time on A Brief History Mystery. And we are back with Mystery Machine live on Wednesday at 9 p.m. with Dave, who is back with us. So we're going to be talking about the great global warming conspiracy. So that's us next week. Thank you, guys. See you all again really soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.